$10,000 in Wells Fargo debt could cost you an extra $4,800, and the clause that makes it happen is buried in paragraph 7 of your contract. But before you dismiss this as conspiracy thinking, understand that this is completely legal, fully disclosed in the fine print, and designed to quietly escalate your payments and stretch your payoff timeline without most borrowers realizing the trap is closing until it's far too late. I'm going to spend the next 15 minutes breaking down exactly how this works, showing you real case studies of people affected, examining the specific contractual language banks use to hide these fees, calculating the precise dollar impact on different loan amounts, and then walking you through the concrete steps you can take today to audit your own account and protect yourself from losing thousands of dollars. # the hidden clause, what IT is and where IT hides. Let's start with the fundamental issue. When you sign a loan document with Wells Fargo or most major banks, you're not just signing one simple agreement. You're receiving a package of documents that can total 40 to 60 pages. Most borrowers skim the first few pages, sign at the bottom, and never look at pages 15 through 40 again. The problematic clause we're discussing typically appears somewhere in the middle of this stack, often in sections labeled payment terms, rate adjustment provisions, account management fees, or buried within what appears to be standard boilerplate text. It uses deliberately vague language like Wells Fargo reserves the right to adjust applicable rates based on account performance metrics, or payment terms may be modified based on credit utilization assessment, or the bank may implement rate adjustments to reflect current risk assessment factors. According to a 2023 study by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPB, 67% of borrowers couldn't locate specific clauses in their contracts within 5 minutes of being asked, and 84% admitted they didn't fully understand the implications of rate adjustment clauses. This isn't because borrowers are careless, it's because banks intentionally make these sections confusing. Bank of America's own loan documents use an average of 23 5-point font in the introduction but drop to 9-point font in the critical terms sections, a deliberate readability reduction that studies show reduces comprehension by approximately 40%. Here's the specific mechanics of how this trap works. The clause grants the bank authority to adjust your interest rate or extend your loan term based on criteria that seem objective but are actually highly subjective. Common triggers include: first, if you miss even one payment, even by 1 day. A single late payment, even if you catch it immediately, can trigger rate increases of 5% to 3%. What most borrowers don't realize is that late doesn't mean 30 days late. Many contracts define late as any payment not received by the due date, meaning if your check arrives on day 2, you're technically late. Second, if your credit score drops below a certain threshold. But here's where it gets insidious. The threshold is often vague. The contract might say if your credit profile deteriorates without specifying what deterioration means. In practice, Wells Fargo has been documented using as little as a 20-point drop as justification. Third, increased debt-to-income ratio. If you take out another credit card or car loan, even if you're paying everything on time, the bank can argue your credit profile has changed and invoke rate increases. Fourth, changes in employment. Some contracts specify that if you change employers even within the same industry and at higher pay, the bank can request a rate review. Technically optional, but they make the alternative painful. # the real cost. Case studies and calculations. Let's look at Sarah's actual case. In 2019, she took out a $12,000 personal loan from Wells Fargo at 5% interest for a 60-month term. Her monthly payment was calculated at $285.23. By month 8, her water heater broke and she was 3 days late making a payment while she handled the emergency. Wells Fargo's rate adjustment clause was triggered. The exact language read: failure to maintain timely payment history may result in rate modification. Her rate jumped to 11.2%. But that's not where it ended. Because her rate increased, her monthly payment also increased to $312.45, which meant she was now stretching to make payments. She missed another payment in month 15 due to job transition. She got a better job, but there was a 2-week gap. Another rate bump, 13.8%. Her payment is now $412.18 per month. What started as a $17,113.80 total cost loan, 60 months times $285.23 is now projected to cost over $24,000 due to the compounding effect of rate increases and extended terms. That's an extra $6,886 on a $12,000 loan. Or consider Marcus's situation. $8,500 loan, 7.2% initial rate, $155/month payment. After 2 years of perfect payment history, his credit score actually dropped by 35 points, not because he did anything wrong, but because he paid off other debts, reducing his credit mix score. Technically, this score drop triggered his rate adjustment clause. His new rate, 9.8%. New monthly payment, $178. Over the life of the loan, instead of paying $5,580 total, he'll pay $6,420. That's $840 in additional cost purely due to a technical score fluctuation while he was actively improving his financial position. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau received 847 complaints about Wells Fargo's rate adjustment practices between 2019-2023. When they analyzed these cases, they found the average additional cost paid was $100 per affected borrower, and that's only counting people who actually filed complaints. Estimates suggest the real number of affected borrowers reaches into the hundreds of thousands. # the contractual language. What to search for when you look at your contract. Search specifically for these phrases. Reserves the right to. This is the magic phrase that banks use to give themselves almost unlimited flexibility. If you see Wells Fargo reserve the right to adjust, modify, or revise, what follows is your risk zone. At the bank's sole discretion, this phrase means the bank doesn't need your permission or agreement to make changes. They have unilateral authority. Performance metrics or account performance, vague metrics that aren't clearly defined, giving the bank interpretive freedom. Credit profile assessment or risk assessment. These allow the bank to change rates based on factors they define internally, potentially without transparent criteria. Material change in credit circumstances. What's material? A 10-point drop, a 50-point drop. The contract likely doesn't specify, meaning the bank decides. Subject to rate adjustment. This innocuous phrase, often buried in footnotes, means your rate is not fixed and can change regardless of what you were initially quoted. Payment terms may be extended. This means they can stretch your loan term from 5 years to 6 or 7 years, significantly increasing total interest paid. # counterarguments and the bank's perspective. To be fair, banks argue these clauses exist for legitimate risk management. They contend that when a borrower's financial situation materially changes, they need to adjust rates to reflect that risk. If someone suddenly becomes high risk, should the bank be forced to keep lending at the same rate? There's also the argument that these terms are disclosed. They're in the contract, signed by the borrower. Banks point out that borrowers have the option to read these documents. They claim ignorance doesn't equal unfairness. Some financial institutions argue that fixed-rate loans would disappear entirely if banks couldn't adjust for risk changes, and that would hurt consumers by making credit more expensive or unavailable overall. But here's where these arguments fall apart. First, disclosure without comprehension isn't really disclosure. If 84% of borrowers don't understand what they're signing, the disclosure isn't functioning as intended. Second, the clauses are so vague that they grant banks virtually unlimited power, which goes beyond risk management into profit maximization. Third, the triggers are often things borrowers can't control: credit score fluctuations, employment changes during job searches, or even economic downturns affecting their industry. # your action plan. Audit your account today. Step 1. Locate your original loan documents. You should have received these when you signed. If you can't find them, call Wells Fargo at their account services number and request a copy of my original loan agreement and all amendments. Step 2. Use the find function. Control+F on Windows, Command+F on Mac to search for the phrases I mentioned. Write down every instance of reserves the right, sole discretion, and rate adjustment. Step 3. Read carefully the specific conditions under which rate changes can occur. If they're vague, that's a red flag. Step 4. Pull your loan history from your Wells Fargo account. If you've experienced any rate increases, go back to your documents and see if you can identify which clause was triggered. Often the bank won't explicitly tell you which clause caused the increase. Step 5. If you identify unjustified rate increases, document everything and file a complaint with the CFPB at Consumer Finance. Gov. Include your loan documents, your payment history, and a clear explanation of what rate increases you've experienced. Step 6. Consider consulting with a consumer protection attorney. Many offer free consultations, and if you've been impacted by improper rate adjustments, you may have grounds for legal action. Final step. Going forward, if you're taking on new debt with any major bank, request a truly fixed-rate loan where the rate cannot change except under the most